The smell never leaves you. That's what I tell people when they ask about the trains. Not the blood, not the screaming, not the boys crying for their mothers. The smell, gangrene and carbolic acid and something else underneath it all. Death, I suppose. Sweet and rotten at the same time. 40 years later, and sometimes I'll be cooking dinner and I'll smell it again. Have to leave the room. My name is Eleanor Hartwell. I was 26 when I joined the American Red Cross in 1917, right after we entered the war. I'd been a nurse at Presbyterian Hospital in Chicago for 4 years. Thought I'd seen everything. Thought I knew what suffering looked like. I knew nothing. They recruited us in waves after the declaration of war. Posters everywhere. Join the Red Cross. Your country needs you. All of that. My fiancé had already enlisted, shipped out with the AEF in June. We were supposed to be married that spring. I wore his ring on a chain around my neck because nurses weren't allowed to wear jewelry. I never got to marry him. He died at Belleau Wood in June of 1918, but that comes later. The Red Cross sent us to training camps first. How to deal with gas casualties, how to treat shock, how to change dressings under field conditions. They tried to prepare us, showed us photographs, had doctors lecture us about the kinds of wounds we'd see, told us it would be difficult, and they had no idea, neither did we. I shipped out to France in September 1917, Southampton to Le Havre, then by train to a base hospital near Toul. I remember looking out the window as we traveled through the French countryside, seeing the shell damage even that far from the front. Ruined buildings, cratered fields, refugees on the roads with everything they owned in carts and wheelbarrows. The war was real in a way it hadn't been back home, real and close and waiting. I spent 2 months at the base hospital, long wards full of men with every kind of wound you could imagine. I learned how to pack abdominal wounds, how to irrigate shattered limbs, how to hold a man's hand while he died, because there was nothing else we could do. I learned how to keep working when you wanted to scream, how to smile at a boy who just lost both his legs, how to lie and tell them they'd be fine when you knew they wouldn't. I thought that was the worst of it. Thought I'd reached the bottom of what this war could show me. Then they assigned me to the hospital trains. December 1917. They needed nurses who could handle the work, who wouldn't break down. I'd proven I could do the job, so they put me on a train. Train Sanitaire Américain number 12, my home for the next 11 months. The trains ran from the casualty clearing stations near the front to the base hospitals in the rear. Sometimes that was 20 miles. Sometimes it was 200. The trip could take hours or days, depending on where they needed us, how damaged the rails were, how many times we had to stop for German artillery or air attacks. And we'd make that journey with 300 wounded men packed into converted freight cars, lying on stretchers stacked 3 high, bleeding and screaming and dying while we tried to save them. That first day I walked the length of that train, I understood. This wasn't a hospital. This was a sorting house. Our job wasn't to heal these men. Our job was to keep as many of them alive as possible until we could get them somewhere that might heal them. Some of them we couldn't keep alive. Some of them we shouldn't have tried. But we did. We always tried. My first trip out, we loaded 340 men at a clearing station just behind the Verdun sector. The offensive there had been over for more than a year, but the fighting continued, always continued. Men kept dying over the same muddy hills their brothers had died on in 1916. I was assigned to Car 7, 42 men on stretchers, stacked in 3 tiers along both walls. The car had been a freight wagon before the war. They'd added ventilation slots and painted red crosses on the sides. That was it. No heat in winter, no cooling in summer, just wooden walls and wounded men and us. The senior nurse on my car was a woman named Catherine Brennan from Boston. She'd been on the train since early 1917, had made more runs than anyone could count. She had that look in her eyes, the one I'd learned to recognize, the one that said she'd seen too much but kept going anyway because stopping meant thinking about it. Don't get attached, she told me before that first run. Learn their wounds, not their names. Makes it easier. I tried to follow that advice, lasted about 3 hours. The boy in stretcher 12 had taken shrapnel to the chest. 20 years old, maybe younger, from somewhere in Kansas, he told me. Farm boy, kept asking if he was going to die. I told him no, told him he'd be fine, told him we'd have him fixed up in no time. He died somewhere outside of Bar-le-Duc, just stopped breathing between one moment and the next. I was holding his hand when it happened. Felt him go. His name was Thomas Miller, Private 26th Infantry Division. I wrote his mother a letter when I got back to base. Never got a reply. That was the first. There would be hundreds more before I was done. The trains ran constantly. As soon as we dropped off wounded at a base hospital, we'd turn around and head back up to collect more. Sometimes we'd barely have time to resupply. Fresh bandages, morphine, saline, before we were loading again. January 1918 was brutal. The winter was the worst France had seen in years. The cold made everything harder. Wounds that might have survived in better conditions went septic. Men died from exposure on top of their injuries. The water in our basins would freeze overnight, and still they kept coming. We developed routines. Had to. You couldn't function without them. When we reached a casualty clearing station, the walking wounded would board first. Men who could move on their own, who had minor injuries or were in the early stages of recovery, they'd pack into the passenger cars we had at the front of the train. Then came the stretcher cases. The doctors at the clearing station would triage them, immediate, urgent, routine. We'd load them in that order, trying to put the worst cases in the cars nearest the medical supply car so we could reach them faster. But triage wasn't an exact science. Men who looked stable would suddenly crash. Wounds you thought were under control would start bleeding again when you moved them. And you never knew what you'd find when you pulled back a dressing that had been applied hours or days earlier at a field station. My second trip out, we loaded a boy who'd been hit in the abdomen. The field medic had packed the wound and wrapped it, looked stable enough. We put him in stretcher 18, middle tier. 4 hours into the journey, I smelled it, that sweet, rotten smell. Opened his dressing and nearly vomited. The wound had gone necrotic, gangrene spreading through his belly. He was conscious, watching my face, reading what was there. It's bad, isn't it? He said. I couldn't lie to him, not with that smell between us, not with what I could see. Yes, I said, it's bad. He nodded, didn't cry, didn't panic, just nodded. How long? I don't know. Days, maybe. We'll get you to a hospital. Don't, he said, don't lie, please. So I didn't. I gave him morphine, made him as comfortable as I could. Held his hand when he asked me to. He died that night, 23 years old, from Philadelphia. Wanted to be a teacher after the war. His name was James Costello. I wrote his mother, too. You learned fast on the trains. Learned which wounds were survivable and which weren't. Learned to prioritize, to spend your time where it might make a difference. Learn to walk past men who were dying because there were men who might live if you got to them fast enough. Learn to make those choices and live with them. Catherine taught me the efficiency of it. You have 42 men in this car, she'd say. You can't save all of them, but you can save some of them. Focus on those. Made sense, cold, practical sense. But every time I walked past a dying man to treat someone else, I felt something inside me crack a little more. The worst cases were the gas casualties, mustard gas, chlorine gas, phosgene. The Germans used them all, and so did we. The men would come in with their lungs burned, drowning in their own fluids, coughing up pieces of their throats. There was nothing we could do for them, nothing real. We'd give them morphine for the pain, oxygen if we had it, try to make them comfortable. But they were dying the moment they breathed it in. just took them days or weeks to finish. And they'd beg us to help them, beg us to make it stop. Some of them would beg us to kill them. We couldn't, of course, against regulations, against our oaths, against everything we were supposed to be. So we'd give them more morphine, enough to ease them into unconsciousness and hope they wouldn't wake up again. Some nights I'd wonder if that was the same thing, if we were just taking longer to do what they were asking for. February brought new offensives, new casualties. The loading stations could barely keep up. We'd arrived to find hundreds of men waiting, lying on stretchers in the mud and the cold, sometimes for days before a train could take them. We'd load as many as we could fit, pack them in until there was barely room to walk between the stretchers. Men on the floor, in the aisles, anywhere we could find space. The regulations said 40 per car. We'd regularly carry 50 or 60. Some of them would die before we even left the station. We'd be loading and a man would just stop, and we'd have to pull him off and load someone else in his place because we didn't have time to do anything else. It was triage on an industrial scale, a machine that processed wounded men, sorted them, moved them along. And we were just parts of that machine, doing our jobs, trying not to break down. One night in March, we were loading near Chateau Thierry, American boys mostly. The 1st Division had been in heavy fighting. The Germans were testing our lines, seeing how the new American troops would hold up. We loaded them in the dark, by lantern light, working fast because German artillery had the range and they liked to shell the rail lines. Could hear the guns in the distance, see the flashes on the horizon. A shell landed close, not close enough to hit us, but close enough to spray us with mud and make the whole train rock. The wounded started screaming, the ones who'd been in the trenches, who knew what that sound meant. We kept loading, had to. The alternative was leaving them there, got the train loaded, and pulled out just before the Germans found the range. Could see the station we'd just left disappearing in shell bursts as we rolled away. That was the night I stopped sleeping well, started having dreams where I was back on the platform, loading wounded, and the shells kept getting closer and closer, but I couldn't move fast enough, couldn't get them all loaded before I'd wake up sweating, heart pounding, still smelling the mud and blood and cordite. Catherine found me one night, sitting in the medical supply car, shaking. Didn't ask what was wrong, just sat down next to me. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked her. "Too long," she said. "You?" "Not long enough yet." She understood what I meant. There was a point you had to reach, a threshold of horror you had to cross before you went numb enough to keep functioning. I wasn't there yet, still felt everything, still cared. "It gets easier," she said. "Does it?" She didn't answer, didn't need to. We both knew the truth. It didn't get easier. You just got better at pretending it did. Spring of 1918, the German spring offensive hit like a hammer. Operation Michael started March 21st. We didn't know the name then, didn't know it was supposed to be Germany's final push to win the war before American reinforcements could tip the balance. We just knew that suddenly the casualties were coming faster than we could handle them. The trains ran day and night. We'd drop off one load and immediately head back for another. No breaks, no rest, just constant motion. Load, transport, unload, repeat. I stopped counting how many men passed through my car. Stopped trying to remember their faces. Catherine had been right about that, at least. You couldn't function if you held on to them all. But some you couldn't let go of. There was a boy, God, he was just a boy, from Wyoming, 19 years old. Cowboy, he told me. Worked on his father's ranch before he enlisted. Both his legs were gone below the knee, blast from a shell. He was stable when we loaded him, stumps properly dressed, not too much blood loss, no signs of infection. He should have made it, but somewhere during the journey, lying there in that stretcher stacked between two other wounded men, he gave up. I could see it happen, watched the light go out of his eyes, even though he was still breathing. "I can't go home like this," he said. "Can't work the ranch, can't ride, can't do anything." "You're alive," I told him. "That's what matters. Your family will just be glad you're alive." He looked at me like I was stupid. Maybe I was. This isn't alive, he said. He died that night. No medical reason for it. His wounds were healing. His vitals were stable. He just stopped, turned his face to the wall and stopped. The doctors would call it failure to thrive. Said it happened sometimes with severe trauma patients. They'd lose the will to live and their bodies would just shut down. But I knew the truth. He'd made a choice, decided he'd rather die than go home ruined. I couldn't even be angry at him for it. I understood. The trains themselves were breaking down under the constant use. The cars weren't meant to carry such heavy loads, weren't meant to run this often. Axles would crack, wheels would need replacing, the makeshift medical equipment would fail, and we'd have to keep going anyway, make do with what we had. One trip in April, the heating system in my car failed. It was a cold night, temperature near freezing. I spent the entire journey trying to keep the wounded men warm with whatever blankets we had, but it wasn't enough. 3 men died from exposure that night, not from their wounds, from the cold, because the damn heating system failed and I couldn't keep them warm. I filed a report when we got back, demanded they fix the cars properly. They told me they'd add it to the maintenance queue. It was 6 weeks before that car got repaired. 6 weeks of running without heat. How many men died in that time? I stopped counting. The spring offensive brought us new types of casualties, too. The Germans were using stormtrooper tactics, fast, aggressive assaults with flamethrowers and grenades. We started seeing burn victims, men with their faces and hands melted, skin hanging off in sheets. There's no good way to describe what a flamethrower does to a human body. The burns go deep into the muscle and bone. The pain is, I can't describe it. The men would scream until their voices gave out, then just lay there making these awful keening sounds. We'd give them morphine, give them as much as we dared, sometimes more. Try to knock them out, try to give them any relief at all. But morphine has limits. After a certain point, the pain just breaks through. And they'd beg, God, how they'd beg. One of them grabbed my arm. His hand was burned so badly I could see the bones in his fingers. Kill me, he said. Please, I know you can. Please. I gave him more morphine, gave him enough that I knew he wouldn't wake up. Watched his eyes close, watched his breathing slow. He died 2 hours later, and I told myself it was the burns. Told myself he would have died anyway. Maybe that was even true. But I knew what I'd done. Knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Catherine found me after that run, crying in the supply car. Hadn't cried since I started on the trains, but I couldn't stop it then. She didn't say anything, just held me while I sobbed. When I finally got control of myself, she looked at me with those dead eyes of hers. You did the right thing, she said. Did I? Yes. I wanted to believe her. Wanted to think that mercy was the right thing, that ending suffering was justified. But I'd taken an oath. First, do no harm. How much morphine was harm? How much was mercy? Where was the line? I never figured that out. Made that same choice dozens of times over the next months. Each time told myself I was helping, that I was easing their passing, that it was the humane thing to do. Each time felt a little more of myself disappear. May brought Cantigny, the first major American offensive, our boys fighting on their own, trying to prove they could hold their own against the Germans. They took the objective, held it against counterattacks. The cost came to us on the trains. I saw boys with their faces shot away, saw boys holding their intestines in their hands, saw boys who'd been so badly mangled you couldn't tell what parts were supposed to be where, and we'd patch them up, pump them full of saline and morphine, and send them on to the base hospitals where surgeons would try to put them back together. Some of them made it, most didn't. There was one, I don't remember his name, couldn't even see his face through the bandages, who'd taken machine gun fire across his torso, 14 entry wounds. By all rights, he should have been dead already, but he wasn't. He was conscious, alert, asking about his buddies, wanted to know if they'd held the position, if they'd won. Yes, I told him. You won. He smiled. I couldn't see it under the bandages, but I could hear it in his voice. Good, he said. That's good. He died an hour later, happy that he'd won, that his death had meant something. I wanted to tell him the truth, that the position they'd taken would be lost and retaken a dozen times before the war ended, that his death didn't mean anything except that he was dead and his mother would get a telegram. But I didn't. I let him die, thinking it mattered. Maybe that was a mercy, too. I don't know anymore. June, Belleau Wood. The Marines went into those woods and the Germans chewed them apart. The casualties were, I don't have words. We ran constant trains for 3 weeks. Load, transport, unload, back for more. Sometimes we'd make 2 or 3 runs in a single day. The men coming out of Belleau Wood were different somehow, harder. The ones who could talk would tell us stories about fighting in the woods, about close combat with bayonets and rifle butts, about Germans who wouldn't surrender and Marines who wouldn't retreat. It was butchery dressed up as battle, medieval warfare with modern weapons. One of the wounded was a lieutenant from Georgia, took a bullet through his shoulder, another through his thigh, should have been in shock, should have been delirious from blood loss, but he was alert, angry, demanding to be sent back. We haven't taken the wood yet, he kept saying. They need me. I have to go back. You're going to a hospital, I told him. You're done fighting. Like hell I am. Soon as they patch me up, I'm going back. I didn't argue with him. Knew he wouldn't make it that far. The thigh wound had nicked his femoral artery. We'd packed it and wrapped it, but the bleeding wasn't stopping. He had maybe a few hours. He died before we reached the hospital. Never knew he wouldn't make it back to fight. Maybe that was for the best. That same run, I had a Marine who'd taken shrapnel across his back, peppered with metal fragments, dozens of them. He'd live, but he'd carry those fragments for the rest of his life. They didn't have time to dig them all out in the field hospitals. How bad? He asked me. You'll live, I said. Going to hurt for a while, but you'll live. Can I go home? Probably. This is a ticket home if you want it. He started crying, not from pain, from relief. Thank God, he said. Thank God. I understood that too. By then, everyone understood. Getting wounded bad enough to go home, but not bad enough to die, that was the best outcome you could hope for. That was winning. The war had taught us to measure victory in degrees of survival. July brought more offensives, more casualties. The Second Battle of the Marne, American divisions thrown into the line alongside French troops. The tide was turning, they told us. The Germans were on their back foot. All I could see was more wounded, more trains full of broken boys, more men dying in stretchers while I tried to save them. The heat that summer was brutal. The train cars would become ovens, metal walls radiating heat, no air circulation. Men would die from heat stroke on top of their wounds. We'd try to ventilate the cars, try to get air moving, but there was only so much we could do. One afternoon in August, it must have been over 100 degrees in my car. I was working through the stretchers, checking dressings, giving water to the men who could drink. Halfway through, I just stopped. Stood there in the middle of the aisle, surrounded by wounded men, unable to move. Couldn't remember what I was supposed to be doing. Couldn't remember why I was there. One of the wounded, a corporal from Texas with his arm in a sling, called out to me. Miss, you all right? I looked at him, opened my mouth to respond. Nothing came out. He started calling for Catherine. She came, found me standing there, saw whatever was on my face, took me by the arm and led me to the medical supply car. Sit, she said. I sat. You're done for today, she said. I'll finish your car. I can't. I have to. You're done, she said again, firm but not unkind. It happens. Happened to me too back in 17. You hit a wall and you just stop. Take the rest of this runoff. We'll manage. I wanted to argue, wanted to say I was fine, that I could keep going, but I couldn't. Something had broken inside me and I didn't know how to fix it. I spent that trip in the supply car, sitting on a crate of bandages, staring at the wall, could hear the wounded men in the other cars, could hear the nurses moving between them, could hear the train rattling along the tracks. And I felt nothing, just empty, hollow. When we got back to base, Catherine pulled me aside. "You need a break," she said, "and I'm fine." "No, you're not. None of us are, but you're at the edge. I can see it. Take a week. Go somewhere quiet. Rest. They need us. We're short-staffed as it is. They need us functional. You're no good to anyone like this." She was right. I knew she was right. But taking time off felt like abandonment, felt like I was letting down the men who needed help. "1 week," Catherine said, "then come back. But if you don't take a break now, you'll break completely, and then you're no good to anyone ever again." I took the week, went to a small village 50 miles from the front, a place the war hadn't quite reached yet, stayed in a room above a cafe, slept for 14 hours straight. When I woke up, I couldn't remember where I was. Had a moment of panic, thinking I'd overslept, that I'd missed a run, that wounded men were dying because I wasn't there. Then I remembered. I was on leave. I was allowed to rest, but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. All the men I'd failed to save. All the men I'd watched die. All the choices I'd made. All the lines I'd crossed. I went back after 4 days. Couldn't stand being away any longer. Couldn't stand being alone with my thoughts. Catherine saw me come back early. Didn't say anything, just nodded. She understood. We always went back, because what else was there? September 1918, the Meuse-Argonne offensive, the final American push, the big one. They threw everything we had at the Germans, over 1 million American troops, the largest operation in American military history up to that point. The casualties were catastrophic. The trains couldn't keep up. We'd have wounded men waiting days at the clearing stations, lying in the mud, their wounds going septic, dying before we could even get them loaded. We started running longer trains, cramming more men into each car. My car that was designed for 40 regularly held 70 or 80. Men on every surface, in every space, stacked so tight you could barely move between them. And still, it wasn't enough. I stopped sleeping entirely. Would work a run, get back to base, immediately get sent out on another one. Sometimes I'd be on the trains for 3 or 4 days straight, just moving between loading stations and hospitals, never stopping. The exhaustion did strange things to your mind. I'd be changing a dressing, and suddenly I'd be back in Chicago, in the hospital there, treating a patient who'd come in from a factory accident. Then I'd blink, and I'd be back on the train, back in the war, and I couldn't remember which was real. Other times I'd look at the wounded men, and I wouldn't see people anymore, just wounds, just problems to solve. Arterial bleeder in stretcher 12, sucking chest wound in stretcher 7, abdominal trauma in stretcher 23. Not men, not boys with mothers and sweethearts and dreams, just medical cases. Catherine had been right. You had to stop seeing them as people. Had to, or you'd break. But I could feel myself breaking anyway. October 8th, 1918, that's the day I remember. Most clearly, even now. We were loading at a clearing station near Montfaucon. Heavy fighting in the area, the Germans making a stand. The wounded were coming in faster than we could process them. Hundreds of them, lying on stretchers in rows that seemed to go on forever. I was doing initial assessments, deciding who went on the train and in what order. Triage at its most basic. This one can wait. This one needs immediate attention. This one won't make it anyway. That last category, the ones who wouldn't make it, we had a section for them off to the side. We'd give them morphine, make them comfortable, leave them there while we loaded the men who might survive. I was evaluating a sergeant from Missouri, chest wound, both lungs compromised, coughing up blood. He was drowning in his own fluids, and there wasn't anything we could do. Not there, not with the resources we had. "I'm sorry," I said. "We're going to make you comfortable, but..." "No," he said, grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Please, please don't leave me here. I don't want to die in the mud, please." I looked at him. looked at his face, saw my brother there, my brother who'd enlisted in 17, who I hadn't seen in over a year, who I didn't know if he was alive or dead. Please, he said again, I should have followed protocol, should have given him morphine and moved on. That's what I was supposed to do. That's what I'd done 100 times before. But I couldn't, not with my brother's face looking at me. Okay, I said, we'll get you on the train. I loaded him in my car, put him in a stretcher that should have gone to someone with a better chance. Knew I was making the wrong choice, knew I was letting my emotions override my training. He died 4 hours into the journey, never made it to a hospital. Died in that stretcher, drowning in his own blood, just like I'd known he would. And because he'd taken that stretcher, another man who might have survived had to wait. That man died too before the next train could take him. I killed them both. Made a choice that killed them both. When we got back to base, I went to Catherine. Told her what I'd done. Expected her to be angry, to report me, to tell me I'd violated every principle of triage. She just looked tired. We all do it eventually, she said. Make the wrong choice for the right reason, or the right choice for the wrong reason. After a while, you can't tell the difference anymore. I killed them. No, the war killed them. You just happened to be there when it happened. That's not... It is, she said. Eleanor, you need to understand something. You can't save them all. You can't even save most of them. The best you can do is save some of them, and some days you can't even do that. So what's the point? Why do we keep doing this? She didn't have an answer. Neither did I. The next day, I went back to work, loaded wounded, transported them, unloaded them, made my assessments, made my choices, watched men die. But something had changed. The wall I'd built between myself and the work, between myself and the wounded, between myself and the horror, it was crumbling, and I couldn't rebuild it. I started making mistakes, missing signs of internal bleeding, miscalculating morphine doses, forgetting to check dressings. Small mistakes mostly, but on the trains, small mistakes killed people. Catherine noticed. Started double-checking my work, covering for me, never said anything, but I knew she saw what was happening. I was breaking down, slowly, steadily, irreversibly. November 7th, 1918, 4 days before the armistice. We were loading wounded from the final push. The Germans were retreating, everyone said. The war was almost over, just a few more days. Just a few more days meant a few more trains full of wounded, meant more men dying for ground that wouldn't matter in a week. One of them was from Chicago, private first class named Michael something. I never got his last name. 21 years old, had taken a shell fragment to the abdomen. You're from Chicago? He said when he heard my accent. Yes, me too. South Side. You know Mitchell's drugstore on State Street? I do. My dad owns it, he said, smiled despite the pain. Small world. I got him loaded, made sure he was stable. The wound was bad but survivable if we got him to surgery fast enough. He had a chance. We pulled out. I was checking on other patients when I heard someone calling for help from his section. Went over and found him bleeding again. The fragment had shifted, torn something internal. I tried to pack the wound, tried to stop the bleeding, but it was too deep, too severe. He was bleeding out internally and there was nothing I could do. He knew it too. Could see it in my face. Tell my dad, he said. Tell him I tried to make it home. You're going to tell him yourself, I said. Lying again, always lying. He died holding my hand. Died 4 days before the war ended. Died close enough to home that he could almost taste it. I sat there next to his stretcher for I don't know how long. Just sat there, holding his dead hand, unable to move. Catherine found me, gently took his hand from mine, covered his face with a sheet. Come on, she said. There are others who need you. But I couldn't move, couldn't stand, couldn't do anything. Eleanor, she said, firm now. Come on. I can't, I said. I can't do this anymore. I know, she said, but you have to. Just a little longer. So I did. Got up, kept working, finish the run, because what else could I do? The armistice came on November 11th. The war was over, but the trains kept running for weeks, carrying the last of the wounded back from the front. Men who'd survived the whole war only to be wounded in the final days, the final hours. My last run was November 23rd, 1918, 12 days after the armistice. We loaded wounded from the last hospital near Verdun, transported them to a base hospital near Paris. Not one man died on that trip, not one. It was the first time in 11 months I'd completed a run without losing anyone. I should have felt relief, should have felt something good. I felt nothing at all. They sent us home in December, gave us commendations, thanked us for our service. The Red Cross held a ceremony in Paris. They gave me a medal. I don't remember what it was for. I got back to Chicago 2 days after Christmas, 1918. My parents met me at the station. They cried. I couldn't. Everything looked the same. The buildings, the streets, the drugstore on State Street where that boy's father worked. All of it exactly the same as when I'd left. But I couldn't see it the same way. Kept seeing it from above, the way it would look from a train. Kept calculating distances, wondering how many wounded you could fit in each building, how quickly you could move them. My fiancé's mother came to see me, wanted to know about how he died, what his last words were, if he suffered. I told her he died quickly at Belleau Wood, told her he didn't suffer, told her he was brave. All lies. I didn't know how he died, never saw his body, never heard from anyone who was there, just got a telegram like everyone else, missing in action, presumed dead. But she needed to hear those things, needed to believe he'd died well, that it had meant something. So I lied to her like I'd lied to hundreds of dying boys, told her what she needed to hear. She thanked me for it, cried and thanked me. I went back to nursing at Presbyterian Hospital, tried to slip back into my old life, my old routines, but I couldn't do it. Couldn't treat normal injuries, normal illnesses. Everything seemed so trivial compared to what I'd seen. A broken arm. I'd treated boys with 3 limbs blown off. A fever. I'd watched men die from gangrene, a difficult childbirth. I'd held intestines in place while a train rattled over damaged rails. None of it seemed real. None of it seemed to matter. I lasted 6 months before I quit. Couldn't explain to my supervisor why. Couldn't make her understand. How could I tell her that I'd forgotten how to care about small things? That I'd used up all my empathy on a train in France. I tried other jobs, tried to find something that would make sense, that would feel meaningful. Nothing did. For a long time, I didn't sleep well, would dream about the trains, about the wounded men, about the ones I'd saved and the ones I hadn't. Would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I could smell that smell, gangrene and carbolic acid and death. My parents worried. Suggested I see a doctor. I went once. He asked me questions about the war, about what I'd seen. I tried to explain and couldn't. How do you explain that you watched boys younger than you die by the hundreds, that you made life and death decisions every day, that you got good at deciding who would live and who would die? He prescribed rest, prescribed a change of scenery, as if rest could cure what was wrong with me. I married eventually, not to my fiancé. He never came home from Belleau Wood. To a man I met at church, a good man who'd stayed home during the war. He was kind and patient and tried to understand, but he couldn't. No one could. He'd ask me about the war sometimes. I'd tell him stories, carefully edited versions that left out the worst parts, left out the smell and the screaming and the choices I'd made. Left out the morphine doses that were maybe a little too high. The men I'd left behind because they were too far gone. The mistakes I'd made that cost lives. We had children, 2 girls. I loved them, took care of them, raised them to be good people. But there was always a distance there, a part of me that couldn't quite connect. Because part of me was still on that train, still moving through France, still surrounded by wounded men. My daughters don't know that. They think I was a war nurse, that I served proudly, that I helped people. They're proud of me. They don't know about the men I killed, the ones I gave too much morphine to, the ones I left behind, the ones I made the wrong choice for. They don't know that sometimes on bad days I can still smell that train car, can still hear the screaming. The nightmares never stopped. Got less frequent over the years, but they never went away. I still dream about Michael from the South Side, bleeding out in that stretcher. Still dream about the sergeant from Missouri drowning in his own blood. Still dream about Thomas Miller from Kansas, the first one, asking me if he was going to die. I'm 70 now. The war ended 40 years ago. Most of the nurses I served with are gone. Catherine died in 1934, influenza. The wounded boys are old men now, if they survived. The ones who died would be old men too if they'd lived, but in my dreams they're always young, always dying, always asking me to save them. And I can't. Not then, not now. Just like I couldn't save them on those trains. People thank me for my service sometimes when they find out I was a war nurse. They call me a hero, tell me I should be proud of what I did. I don't tell them that I'm not a hero, that I was just a nurse who tried to do her job and failed more often than she succeeded, that I made choices I still can't reconcile, crossed lines I can't uncross. I don't tell them that I can't stand the smell of carbolic acid, that I can't ride trains without having a panic attack, that I still wake up sometimes convinced I'm back in car 7 with 42 wounded men and not enough morphine to help them all. I don't tell them that the war never ended for me, that I'm still on that train, still moving through France, still trying to save boys who are already dead. They want to believe in heroes, want to believe that war can be noble, that service means something, that the suffering had a purpose. I let them believe it, just like I let those dying boys believe they were going to be fine, that they'd make it home, that it wouldn't hurt much longer. Sometimes I think about all the letters I wrote to mothers and fathers and sweethearts, telling them their boys died bravely, that they didn't suffer, that their last thoughts were of home. Lies. All lies, but they were kind lies, necessary lies, the kind of lies that let people keep living. I've built my whole life after the war on lies like that, pretending I'm fine, pretending I moved on, pretending the war didn't break something fundamental inside me that never healed. My husband knows some of it, sees it on the bad days when I can't leave the house, when sounds make me flinch, when I smell something that sends me back. He tries to help. There's no help for it. You can't fix what's broken when the broken parts are so deep inside you can't even see them anymore. The medal they gave me is in a drawer somewhere. I haven't looked at it in decades. Don't need to. I remember what it represents. It represents 11 months on hospital trains, represents thousands of wounded men, represents choices I made, lines I crossed, boys I couldn't save. Represents the death of everything I was before I climbed onto that train. The girl from Chicago who wanted to be a nurse, who wanted to help people, who thought she understood suffering. She died somewhere in France in 1918, died with the boys in those train cars, died with my fiancé at Belleau Wood, died with every choice I made that turned out to be the wrong one. What came back was something else, something that looks like Eleanor Hartwell but isn't, not really, something that goes through the motions of living while still hanging, suspended between the war and home, between life and death, between mercy and murder. The trains stopped running in 1918, but I never got off. I'm still there in car 7, surrounded by wounded boys, trying to save them, failing to save them, watching them die. Still there, always there. The war ended, but we never came home. None of us ever came home.